Welcome, and thank you for taking part in Risk and Incident Management training. This training will expose you to 3 courses: Hazard Management, Workplace Inspections, and Incident Investigations. Welcome, and thank you for participating in Hazard Management training. The purpose of this training is to coach you in identifying all the hazards in your workplace, assessing the risk posed by those hazards, selecting controls for those hazards, and how to use the Job Hazard Analysis Document, Risk Registry, and safe work practices and safe job procedures effectively. In order to proceed, we must first distinguish between a hazard and a risk. A hazard is any source of potential damage, harm, or adverse effects on someone or something, whereas a risk is the consequence or result of exposure to a hazard. In the image below, you see how the UV radiation of the sun is the hazard, and the risk is sunburn if exposure to the sun is not controlled. To better understand this distinction in the context of our work, let's consider the example of using a cut-off saw to cut asphalt. The cutting blade is a hazard if contact is made during use or if the blade gets stuck while in use. The risks associated with these hazards are cuts, severs, strains, and sprains. Dust and fumes deriving from the cutting process and exhaust are also a hazard. The risks associated with these hazards are respiratory irritation, damage, and disease. Noise produced by the cutting process and the saw is another hazard. This hazard poses a risk of causing hearing damage. And the awkward and static position that the process places you in is a hazard that creates a risk of musculoskeletal disorders such as back pain. Hazards are divided into 2 distinct categories. First, there are safety hazards, which have the potential to cause injury. Second are health hazards, which have the potential to cause harmful health effects. Most hazards expose a worker to multiple risks that can pose a danger to both safety and health. Here's an example. The cutoff saw itself is not the hazard. Hazards are present while the saw is in use. Action must accompany the device to create hazards. Therefore, the saw's cutting blade is a safety hazard in the form of a sharp, moving part, hot part, or something that produces dust, fumes, noise, sparks, projectiles, or debris, thereby posing a risk of cuts, severs, burns, strains, and sprains. And the saw's exhaust is a health hazard in the form of a hot part or something that produces fumes or noise, thereby posing a risk of burns, respiratory irritation, damage or disease, and the risk of hearing damage. Fundamental to hazard management is risk rating. Measuring and rating risk is a systematic evaluation that helps us to 1. Understand how risky a task is, and 2. Develop measures for eliminating or controlling identified hazards. The following factors must be assessed to rate the risk posed by a hazard. We assess accident frequency and severity, jobs where accidents occur frequently or where they occur infrequently but result in disabling injuries. Potential for severe injuries or illnesses are also assessed. The consequence of an accident, hazardous condition, or exposure to harmful substances are potentially severe. We assess newly established jobs due to lack of experience in these jobs. Hazards may not be evident or anticipated. Modified jobs are assessed. New hazards may be associated with changes in job procedures. And infrequently performed jobs are assessed. Workers may be at greater risk when undertaking non-routine jobs. Risk rating points us towards critical tasks. A critical task is one that has a potential to produce major loss to people, equipment, process, or the environment. You know you are dealing with a critical task at Hawkins Contracting if it has an assigned critical rating of 40 or higher. Those critical ratings that identify critical tasks are determined by members of the Health and Safety or Environmental Department or the Joint Health and Safety Committee. The higher the rating, the riskier the task is. All tasks that have been rated can be found on the risk registry. The risk registry is a central depository, a document of all critical tasks, so those tasks with a rating of 40 or higher, and near critical tasks, which are tasks with a rating of 20 to 39. A safe work practice or safe job procedure is created for all tasks in this registry. When rating tasks to determine how risky they are and whether the task should be placed on the risk registry, meaning it has a score of 20 or higher, the HSE department or Joint Health and Safety Committee uses this matrix. We consider likelihood, severity, and frequency, giving each of those categories a score from 1 to 5, and then we place that into a formula. Using the cutoff saw as an example again, it has a likelihood score of 2, severity score of 5, and a frequency score of 3. That gives it a critical rating of 30, which highlights it as a medium risk task. Hazard and risk assessments begin before the project begins using the pre-project workplace hazard assessment template. The template flows in a way where it ends with safe work practices, safe job procedures, and work protection plans, if required, being assigned to that project. Using these results of the pre-project workplace hazard assessment, a master JHA can be created for the entire project. Master JHA is a very important on-site resource for health and safety. The Master JHA is created electronically, then printed and kept on site. All tasks found in the risk registry are listed in the second column of this Master JHA. Instead of adding tasks to a blank JHA, with the Master JHA you remove the tasks that do not apply to your scope of work. Once you have only the tasks that apply, you complete the first column, the Job Steps Tasks column, by handwriting the specific work that is being done. When complete, the Tasks pages of the Master JHA now identifies all hazards to be aware of and the controls for those hazards on that project. The controls that must be applied are found in the last 3 columns. 1, the engineered controls. 2, the relevant safe work practice or safe job procedure where the administrative controls are found. And 3, the PPE and devices controls. The cover page of the Master JHA has blank fields that require daily completion, including name and signature fields for all people on site, project-specific information, weather conditions, and a compact PPE property and site inspection checklist. Also found on the cover page of the Master JHA is 1, the PPE, and 2, the work protection plans that may apply to your day's tasks. Work protection plans are needed for tasks that have a risk profile and/or emergency response needs that our JHA and emergency preparedness plans cannot address well enough. These tasks are typically associated with work that requires the workers to have specific legislated training. These plans must be created in collaboration with the health and safety team. Work protection plans can be created for any new task, but we have templates for those that are most common, as found in the pre-project workplace hazard assessment template. In this template, you can select the need for a work protection plan associated with confined space work, traffic protection, watercourse work, or working at heights. Every once in a while, a new task will find its way onto your site, a task that you haven't yet assessed for hazards or risks. In cases where a task is not found on the risk registry or master JHA, and the task does not require a work protection plan, the site supervisor must conduct a complete hazard assessment of the task prior to proceeding to perform the task. The supervisor must immediately consult with the Health and Safety Department in any case where the hazard assessment process produces a 5 high rating. In all cases, the Health and Safety Department must be notified of this task so it may be determined whether the task must be added to the risk registry. To properly and fully identify all hazards, you must consider all reasonable, foreseeable hazards and hazardous events and situations that have the potential to harm workers. This means considering the work environment, personnel involved in the activity, the work process, equipment and tools, materials, foreseeable misuse of equipment or materials, and organizational culture. To assess whether the risk associated with a hazard might inflict harm, you will perform 2 types of analysis. First is a qualitative assessment. It defines the result or consequences and level of risk, such as injury, illness, or death. Second is a quantitative assessment. This provides practical values for consequences and probability of occurrence, such as high, medium, low, as in the case of our JHA. If ever you have trouble making these assessments for a task that is not on the risk registry, contact the Health and Safety Department for assistance. For these assessments, use the risk matrix on the back of the JHA document to help you rate any task that is not found on the risk registry. Rating a task prior to controls requires you to consider if the task were to be undertaken without planning and coordination. Any task that receives a rating 3 or higher cannot be completed without applying controls that then reduces the risk rating to 2 or less. Our aim is to achieve ratings of 1 wherever possible. If you are confronted with a task that is not found on the risk registry and your assessment determines that the likelihood is occasional, but the severity is catastrophic, that would provide a risk rating of 5. A rating of 5 requires that the Health and Safety Department be contacted for consultation prior to completing your assessment and allowing the task to proceed. The Health and Safety Department will assist in analyzing this task and applying controls, and the task will be added to the risk registry. If your assessment determines that the likelihood is likely, but the severity is moderate, that would provide a risk rating of 4. With a rating of 4 or lower, you may proceed to apply your own controls. If you succeed in lowering the risk level to 2 or lower, you may proceed without consulting the Health and Safety Department in advance. However, you must advise the Health and Safety Department of this task so they can evaluate whether it needs to be added to the risk registry. To properly assign controls, you must understand the hierarchy of controls. The most effective forms of control are elimination, because hazards are physically removed and cease to exist. An example of elimination using the cutoff saw example would be to replace the entire asphalt surface, which removes the need for cutting. The next best control option is substitution. Here a hazard is replaced with a lesser hazard. Using the cutoff saw example again, substituting a standard cutoff using a walk behind substitutes to a lesser hazard. Elimination and substitution provide the greatest degree of risk reduction. The application of these controls occur at the source of the hazard. Engineering controls isolate people from the hazard. The hazard remains present in this case. A walk-behind saw is also an example of engineered control, as is the muffler and blade guard on any saw. Engineering controls reduce risk by prevention or limitation of exposure. The application of these controls occurs along the path between the hazard and the worker. Administrative controls change the way people perform the work assigned to them. An example would be a written safe work practice. And PPE simply applies personal protection to the worker, such as eye and hearing protection. Administrative controls and PPE reduce the risks through the use of safe work practices and safe job procedures, complemented by mandatory PPE. These two controls occur at the worker and are therefore a last line of defense. When selecting controls for all the hazards you've identified, apply the following criteria. Start your consideration at elimination and work your way down. Use multiple controls. Don't just select one when more than one is better and possible. Consider the training and experience of your team members. And the controls are sufficient only when you have achieved a risk rating of low or better. If completing a traditional handwritten JHA rather than a master JHA, in most cases, your task will already be available on the risk registry and you can simply extract that information and insert it by hand in the JHA like this. As you can see, the hazards in the risk registry are matched on the handwritten JHA, as are the controls. For clarity, it is important that you do not bundle multiple tasks into a single job step. For example, if you are cutting asphalt for the purpose of peeling it off and piling it with an excavator, which will then be gathered by a loader and placed in a bin, your job step should not read cutting asphalt with a cutoff saw and removing it with an excavator and loader. Instead, you should have 3 job steps written. 1. Cutting asphalt with a cutoff saw. 2. Lifting and piling asphalt with an excavator. 3. Removing asphalt piles and loading them into bins with a loader. These are different tasks that may have different hazards and controls, and therefore they should be all recorded separately. If a task includes the use of a controlled product, meaning it has a safety data sheet, that safety data sheet must be referenced for controls and that task must be noted on the JHA. For example, if you're sealing pipe hole gaps in a manhole and for that you're using Quickcrete, you must reference Section 8 of the SDS for personal protective equipment and ensure that same personal protective equipment is noted in the controls section of that tasks on the JHA. You can also go as far as striking out any recommended controls that do not apply that are already built into your master JHA. For every job step on a JHA, there is a safe work practice or safe job procedure that supports that job step, and it must be referenced and signed for how you perform the work. All of them are found in the SWP and SJP handbook that accompanies the JHA. All the safe work practices and safe job procedures that apply must be found listed on the master JHA or checked off on the traditional JHAs. Once again, the safe work practice or safe job procedure that supports the job step in your JHA must be referenced if there is ever any question as to how to perform the task. Because safe job procedures are intended to be a more precise guide on how we complete tasks in some cases, especially when the task will occur regularly or over multiple days. The blank fields must be filled in to ensure there are no gaps in the procedure. Both safe work practices and safe job procedures have a section in which you can identify other site-specific steps that may be required if you find that the practice or procedure can be further improved. With all safe job procedures and some safe work practices, you can even go as far as assigning specific people to tasks and equipment. Your safe work practice or safe job procedure may also include visual guides, such as you see here from the backing vehicles and equipment safe job procedure. The job hazard analysis must have everyone's approval. So what does this mean? Not everyone has to take part in the physical completion of the JHA. However, all work contributors must have the time to review and contribute to the JHA prior to starting work activities. The JHA must be revised when valid suggestions are made. All revisions must be reviewed by all contributors. Initial reviews must be signed and revisions must be initialed. And visitors must also sign and review the JHA. The final note in ensuring your JHAs are effective in protecting the health and safety of all people on your project sites is that your JHA document must continually be revisited to ensure that all hazards have been identified, original assumptions about risks are still valid, the risk matrix assessment was applied properly, and controls are effective. Always be ready to revise your JHAs, and when you do, involve everyone working on site and have each person initial the changes. In summary, JHAs must be completed and understood by the entire site team before any work begins, and they must be kept up to date. The JHA is completed using the risk registry. The JHA job step is matched to a safe work practice or safe job procedure found in the risk registry. Hazards and controls from the risk registry are transferred to the JHA for each job step. Work is carried out using the how in the applicable safe work practice or safe job procedure and the controls found in the JHA. When a job step is not found in the risk registry, consult with the Health and Safety Department first if it is a high-risk task, and proceed if it is a medium or low risk task, but still advise the Health and Safety Department of this task. Welcome, and thank you for participating in Workplace Inspections training. The purpose of this training is to help you effectively prepare, conduct, and document workplace inspections, learn about the types of inspections as well as the roles of key participants, and identify the common types of workplace hazards. Workplace inspections are regular examinations of the workplace that are performed to identify hazards and determine the effectiveness of health and safety practices. So why are workplace inspections necessary? Inspections help to maintain safe, healthy workplaces by identifying, assessing, and controlling workplace hazards. An employer must comply with occupational health and safety laws to create and maintain a safe and healthy workplace. There are two clauses in the Occupational Health and Safety Act that pertain to workplace inspections. The first being that a supervisor or a competent person appointed by the supervisor shall inspect all machinery and equipment, including fire extinguishing equipment, magazines, electrical installations, communication systems, sanitation, and medical facilities, buildings and other structures, temporary supports, and means of access and egress at the project to ensure that they do not endanger any worker. And the second states that an inspection shall be made at least once a week or more frequently as the supervisor determines it necessary in order to ensure that the machinery and equipment referred to in subsection 3 do not endanger any worker. Different work groups in the company have different duties and responsibilities. The duties and responsibilities of the employer is to develop and implement effective workplace inspection procedures and schedules, provide workers with the information and training necessary to understand and comply with the inspection process, ensure the Joint Health and Safety Committee is actively involved in scheduling and conducting workplace inspections, review workplace inspections reports and implement required corrective actions, ensure follow-up and monitoring of corrective actions and regular review of workplace procedures, and ensure effective distribution and maintenance of workplace inspection reports and related documents. The supervisor's responsibilities and duties are to conduct formal inspections weekly using the workplace inspection report, ensuring all active sites on their portfolio are inspected a minimum of once per week, and ensuring corrective action is taken to address hazards identified. They must engage workers in the completion and review of the workplace inspection report, review the results of the workplace inspection report with site staff, and participate in the annual review of all inspections if required. The duties and responsibilities of the Joint Health and Safety Committee representatives are to work with the employer in scheduling workplace inspections, actively participate in workplace inspections, review workplace inspection reports and make recommendations for corrective action to the employer, monitor the implementation, follow-up, and evaluation of corrective actions, regularly monitor and review workplace inspection procedures, and make recommendations for improvements when necessary, conduct monthly inspections of active workplaces, with the totality of all inspections equaling that of a total workplace inspection of all sites. Ensure corrective action is taken to address hazards identified during those inspections. The Joint Health and Safety Committee management rep shall inspect each active workplace once per month, providing they are active for 2 or more consecutive weeks. The Joint Health and Safety Committee worker rep shall inspect each active workplace once per month, providing they are active for 2 or more consecutive weeks. And the Site Health and Safety rep shall inspect the workplace for which they were nominated, providing the site is active for 2 or more weeks. Hawkins Contracting maintains a well-constructed and managed inspection program that proactively identifies issues and assesses risks before accidents, injuries, damage, or near misses occur. Hawkins Contracting's workplace inspection report is designed to identify deficiencies or inadequacies in facilities, environment, equipment, tools, and work practices. Also to assess and determine the degree of compliance, to create action items that improve health and safety standards, and to demonstrate management support for the health and safety management system. The workplace inspection report is a legislative function for all construction sites. Every element of the workplace, including the environment, the equipment and tools, and the processes, can include hazards. Types of workplace hazards include biological hazards, such as viruses, diseases, and fungi, chemical hazards, such as cleaning solvents, fuels, psychological hazards, such as stress and harassment and violence, physical hazards, such as noise, extreme temperatures, and radiation, and ergonomic hazards, such as repetitive movements, poor workstation design, etc. Workplace inspectors should be looking for anything that deviates from accepted workplace practices and standards, such as improper use of machinery or tools, violations of safe work practices and safe job procedures, violations of fire safety rules and regulations, lack of PPE, defective or broken tools, machinery, or equipment, poor ergonomics, poor housekeeping, smoking in prohibited areas, and improper storage, labeling, or transportation of controlled products. On-site tools and equipment are an extension of the workplace. Ensuring that they are in good order and fit for use is a part of the workplace inspection report. As such, the inspector must ensure the guidelines set out in the preventative maintenance policy are being met. This includes operators completing equipment pre-use inspections and supervisors reviewing the documents and loading them onto e-compliance, where management can track and review them. The workplace inspection must be completed for all workplaces every active week. This form can be found on the Forms tab in e-compliance. Workplace inspection reports should be supported by photos and notes, and use action items in resolving deficiencies. Workplace inspections must be completed with a worker when being performed by a supervisor. The results of all supervisors' workplace inspections must be shared with all site staff. Any inspection items on the workplace inspection report that begins with 3 asterisks means that this item is legislated. Legislated items must always be in place and in good order. If you come across a legislated item that is missing or not in good order, you must immediately correct that deficiency, and work may have to stop until the deficiency is fully corrected. Always use e-compliance action items when possible in assigning corrective actions. Action items formalize accountability. This means that it is clear what the problem is, how it is being corrected, when it is being corrected, and who is responsible for making the correction. When it is not practical to use an e-compliance action item, make a note that identifies clearly the what, how, when, and who. For any workplace inspection report fails that are immediately corrected, make a note stating just that. Corrective actions include corrective and at times preventative measures in response to deficiencies realized that are implemented immediately to mitigate or eliminate the risks identified in those deficiencies. Workplace inspections procedures include requirements pertaining to follow-up and monitoring. To ensure these corrective actions are properly implemented and are effective, follow-up and monitoring requirements should include identifying a follow-up date, designating a person to follow up, training workers and supervisors to observe the effectiveness of corrective actions, and identifying the monitoring of corrective actions as part of the Joint Health and Safety Committee. In summary, regular workplace inspections should be scheduled, and that schedule must be adhered to. Workers always have a part in workplace inspections. Inspections are meant to cover all areas of the workplace, leaving no stone unturned. Inspection fails must be addressed with quick and effective corrective actions. Welcome, and thank you for participating in Incident Investigation Training. The purpose of this training is to identify what qualifies as an incident, to identify the responsibilities of employers and workers, to identify the role of the Joint Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative, identify the types of incidences that must be reported to the government, identify the rights and responsibilities of a health and safety officer, understand how to lead an incident investigation and what to look for, identify and research the cause of the incident, and identify what is involved in writing a written report for the incident. The term workplace incident refers to any unplanned event that interrupts the completion of an activity. This includes events involving death or serious injury, minor injury, occupational illness, and/or property damage, as well as near-miss incidents. A near miss is an incident in which there is the potential for injury or damage, but none occurs. Almost all workplace incidents are preventable. The purpose of the incident investigation is to identify the root cause of an incident so that appropriate controls can be put in place to prevent similar incidents in the future. The costs of workplace incidents are both personal and financial. There are immediate costs like medical expenses, employee absences, repairs, replacement of property, and the time losses incurred when workplace activities are interrupted. But the overall costs associated with an unsafe workplace are much larger. Repeated incidents lower employee morale and productivity, increase worker turnover, absenteeism, insurance and disability premiums, and even legal expenses. There are many reasons why workers may not report incidents, including minimizing the significance of the incident, as if it's no big deal, nobody got hurt, and wouldn't happen again in a million years. Not wanting to be blamed for the incident. Not wanting to be seen as someone that tells on other workers. Not recognizing the importance of reporting the incident. Or not feeling confident that something can or will be done about the situation. We must encourage all staff to report incidences. The employer must also make sure that supervisors and management take every report seriously, conduct necessary follow-up, and make corrective actions to ensure that the incident will not reoccur. Employees will be commended for reporting incidences and know that their efforts are potentially saving themselves or a co-worker from a serious injury. Duties and responsibilities are applied to everyone in the workplace in categories. The first category being management and the health and safety manager. Management and health and safety manager must take part in site investigations when their assistance is required by the supervisor or when the supervisor is being investigated. They must review incoming reports, analyze, apply corrective action, and monitor the effectiveness of the corrective action. They must start dialogues with injured or ill workers and maintain communication as frequently as the injury deems necessary, or at least once per week. They must investigate all work refusals and maintain records of the process. They must maintain all records for a period that satisfies the expectations of all applicable governing bodies. And they must conduct an annual review of all reports to determine if there is a need for any policy or procedure changes or additions. Changes will likely result in the amendment or creation of new safe work practices and safe job procedures. Supervisors have the duties and responsibilities alongside the Joint Health and Safety Committee certified member if required, and/or the site health and safety representative to investigate all incidences that involve workers. They must report the incidences to the appropriate external parties such as police, fire department, Ministry of Labor, and Ministry of Environment as required. If we are not the constructor, they must report the incident to the constructor. They must ensure corrective actions are implemented and monitored. They must refuse unsafe work and immediately report it to their project manager or senior management and the health and safety manager if there is dispute between them and the superior or client. And they must report work refusals to the project manager and health and safety manager. Workers have the duty to immediately report incidences to the site supervisor. They must refuse unsafe work and immediately report work refusals to the site supervisor and the Joint Health and Safety Committee or the site health and safety representative. They must participate in investigations as required, and they must participate in corrective actions as required. The Joint Health and Safety Committee certified members and the site health and safety representatives, when applicable, along with the site supervisor, must investigate all incidences that involve workers. They must address the incident immediately or during the following Joint Health and Safety Committee meeting to assign action items. They must immediately report worker work refusals to the site supervisor. They must participate in corrective actions as required, and they must participate in the annual review of incident reports as required. When an incident is witnessed, three events must follow. First is corrective action, then the investigation, and third is preventative action. During the first step, corrective action, the employee reports or observes a work-related incident. The employee then initiates the workplace's emergency preparedness plan if it is applicable, and the employee then eliminates the hazard if possible or guards the incident scene in cases where a worker is critically injured, there is an explosion or fire, or a significant environmental contamination. Step 2 is the investigation. For each emergency plan, there are specific post-execution procedures provided in the emergency preparedness plan document, and you must refer to the appropriate plan if one applies. Common to all the emergency plans are the following post-execution procedures. Investigate the incident and complete the appropriate report on e-compliance. Take photos and notes in abundance. Preserve incident properties for investigative purposes. Keep detailed records of all interactions with emergency services personnel. And determine whether the emergency plan was properly observed. There are many things to consider when investigating the incident. This includes things like time of day, weather conditions, the position and location of each person involved in the incident, the presence or absence of required PPE, safety devices in use or not in use at the time of the incident, the condition of safety devices, guards, and controls, the condition of equipment, tools, and other items in use at the time of the incident, hazardous materials present, damage to equipment, tools, safety devices, etc. as a result of the incident, workplace layout and design, and general workplace conditions such as lighting, noise level, cleanliness, etc. Physical evidence can change rapidly, for example, due to weather. So the visual inspection of the area should be conducted as soon as possible. Write down observations, take photos, collect samples, and make a list of witnesses. Keep an open mind. Do not rush to conclusions about the cause of the incident. Wait until all the facts have been gathered. It is important to gather all documents that may help to explain why the incident occurred. Relevant documents may include, but should not be limited to, the organization's written policies, programs, and practices, job hazard analysis, workplace inspection reports, equipment and vehicle pre-use inspections, incident reports, material safety data sheets, disciplinary records of those involved in the incident, training records of those involved in the incident, manuals for equipment and machinery in use at the time of the incident, Joint Health and Safety Committee minutes and records, and the list can go on. The investigation team may also include other participants, such as the Health and Safety Representative or Joint Health and Safety Committee, a safety officer, a union representative, and/or outside experts. Workers directly involved in the incident should not be involved in the investigation, but should be interviewed as part of the investigation process. The results of the investigation will be studied and analyzed by management, at times with the participation of the Joint Health and Safety Committee or Site Health and Safety Representative. All current controls will be analyzed for whether they are adequate. Causes and contributing factors will be identified. Specific preventative measures will be identified, and preventative measures will be dispensed and implemented. For each workplace incident, there are 3 levels of cause: direct, indirect, and root. An incident investigation must seek to identify all 3 levels of cause. The direct causes of a workplace incident are those at-risk behaviors or unsafe conditions that usually occur immediately before the incident. For example, a worker may be driving too fast or using equipment incorrectly. Road conditions may be poor. or equipment may be broken. Indirect causes set the stage for the incident. They are the real reasons or causes for at-risk behaviors and unsafe conditions. Indirect causes are generally categorized into two groups: people factors and job factors. People factors include things like lack of skill or ability, fatigue, and substance abuse. Job factors include things like inappropriate work procedures, inadequate equipment and tools, and lack of supervision. Then there are root causes, which are the fundamental causes of the incident. They underlie all other causes and relate to management system failures. To ensure that the incident will not occur again, the root causes must be identified and steps must be taken to resolve the root causes. Management system factors include things like inadequate occupational health and safety policies, improper implementation and monitoring of the occupational health and safety program, lack of worker training, and equipment design flaws. What must be considered when analyzing the facts? Evidence has been collected. Interviews have been conducted. All relevant documents have been examined. At this point, it should be possible to answer the question of what happened. Now it is time to analyze the facts in order to answer the question of why did this happen? Based on all the information available, clearly identify each step in the sequence of events that led up to the incident. Examine each identified step and determine each potential cause at that step. In this way, identify each of the factors that may have contributed to the incident. Recommended actions should address the root causes of the incident. The focus should be on positive actions that can be taken to avoid a reoccurrence, including things like providing appropriate tools and/or equipment, providing training to workers, supervisors, and/or managers, making changes to the workspace, example, moving equipment, rearranging the layout of the space, improving the environmental conditions of the workplace, revising job tasks to match worker abilities and/or limitations, developing new job procedures and/or modifying existing job procedures, increasing the frequency and/or scope of workplace inspections, eliminating identified hazards, controlling those hazards that cannot be eliminated, and identifying PPE requirements and/or ensuring that PPE is used properly and consistently. Recommendations should be specific and should be assigned to a particular person along with a deadline for completion. The written report should be clear and concise, including the location, date, and time of the incident, the name and job title of each worker involved, a description of the incident, a description of all injuries, illnesses, and property damage, identification of the direct, indirect, and root causes of the incident, and recommendations for corrective actions, including identification of responsible parties and deadline dates. The employer is responsible for communicating the results of the investigation and corrective actions to workers and management. The incident report is an internal document. A copy of the report does not need to be sent to the government. However, it must be kept on file for a specific period of time and must be readily available for inspection by health and safety officers if requested. The employer is responsible for making sure that corrective actions are taken so that the same type of incident does not happen again. Follow-up activities involve making sure that the corrective actions are completed, are effective, and have not created new workplace hazards. Follow-up may include a broad range of things, including workplace inspections and monitoring of workplace activities, developing a timetable for corrective actions, monitoring the timetable to make sure actions are completed as scheduled, inspecting the workplace to make sure corrective actions have been implemented, checking on the condition of workers injured in the incident, making sure that workers affected by the incident obtain the medical care and support required and helping them access required resources, and helping reorient injured workers upon return to the workplace. Occupational health and safety legislation in each jurisdiction in Canada requires the employer to report some types of workplace incidents to government authorities. In general terms, employers must report incidents in which a worker is killed, incidents in which a worker suffers serious illness or injury, designated types of serious incidents including those involving explosions, fires, floods, spills or releases of hazardous substances, structural failures or collapses of buildings, structures, platforms, cranes, or other hoisting devices. While specifics may vary from one jurisdiction to another, in general, employers must report such incidents immediately or as soon as possible, typically within 24 hours. Some jurisdictions have additional incident reporting requirements for specific industries or types of workplaces. Health and safety officers visit workplaces to ensure compliance with occupational health and safety laws and regulations and to investigate unsafe or unhealthy working conditions. When a workplace incident is reported to the government, a health and safety officer is sent to the workplace to investigate. The health and safety officer has the right to inspect the scene of the incident and the overall workplace, speak with people about the incident, seize materials, products, tools, equipment, take samples, conduct tests, take pictures and recordings, examine and copy documents, stop any or all activities at the work site, order the shutdown of any piece of equipment deemed unsafe during his or her investigation, and call for corrective actions. In summary, occupational health and safety legislation includes provisions for incident investigation. We must know the general occupational health and safety responsibilities for employers and those of workers. Management, supervisors, workers, and health and safety representatives, whether on the Joint Health and Safety Committee or a site-specific designate, all have specific duties and responsibilities in incident investigations. Incident investigation is a detailed and thorough process that begins with corrective action and concludes with preventative action. Certain types of incidents must be reported to the government. Health and safety officers will report to the scene to those incidences that must be reported to the government. An incident investigation concludes with a detailed written report. You have reached the end of this training presentation. Thank you for taking part. To conclude this training, please proceed to the test.